It's December 2022 and one of the most ambitious port deals in African history is about to be signed. We're talking about a breathtaking $6 billion vision that would transform 200 kilometers of barren Red Sea coastline into a gleaming gateway for international trade. But who exactly is pulling the strings behind this massive project? Leading the charge is AD Ports Group, Abu Dhabi's premier facilitator of logistics, industry, and trade. Not just any company, it is majority owned by ADQ, an Abu Dhabi sovereign wealth fund, giving it the financial muscle to dream impossibly big. On the other side of the negotiating table sat Sudanese government leaders, a military-led administration headed by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who had seized power in the 2021 coup. And what exactly were they planning to build? Not just another port, no. The consortium envisioned an entire economic ecosystem, a megaport located 200 kilometers north of Port Sudan, complete with an economic zone, industrial facilities, and even a small international airport. The ambition didn't stop at the coast. The project included a massive agricultural zone spanning over 400,000 acres in Sudan's fertile Nile region. For perspective, the project is slightly larger than London and about twice the area of New York City, all connected to the new port by hundreds of miles of new roadways. Think residential cities, resorts to promote tourism, and vast farmlands feeding directly into global supply chains through state-of-the-art facilities. For the UAE, which imports nearly all of its food, this represented a crucial piece of their food security puzzle. The consortium received sole rights to develop, manage, and operate these assets, with complete freedom to create joint ventures and partnerships as needed. For Sudan, the numbers looked compelling. The deal promised a $300 million deposit to the central bank and 35% of the port's profits. After Western donors pulled their billions following the military coup, this represented desperately needed capital. The vision for this deal was clear: create a rival to Port Sudan that could channel a sizable portion of the country's international trade through modern, efficient facilities. But probably the most important aspect of this deal was not its size, but its position. Sudan's coastline sits on one of the world's most critical maritime highways. The Red Sea handles approximately 15% of global maritime trade and 8% of oil shipments. More importantly, Sudan's position near the Bab al-Mandab Strait makes it incredibly valuable for anyone who wants to influence global trade flows. What makes this project even more attractive is Sudan's existing infrastructure. Port Sudan, the country's main seaport, processes nearly 90% of Sudan's imports and serves as a gateway for landlocked neighbors like Ethiopia and South Sudan. But it's also one of Africa's most inefficient ports. Container wait times are much higher than global best practices, and it has constant capacity constraints. The UAE saw an opportunity that went far beyond simple port management and tried to seize it. The Emirates has been systematically acquiring port concessions across Africa. Controlling Abu Amama would give them leverage over the Bab el-Mandeb choke point and help them dominate Red Sea logistics. More than just business, it's geopolitical chess. For Sudan, this deal represented more than money. The Abu Amama project promised to channel international trade through modern infrastructure, potentially reviving the economy through increased trade volumes and foreign investment. Sudan's government saw this as their chance to leapfrog decades of underinvestment. But there was a problem, a big one, and it was growing larger by the day. In this episode, we dive deeper into what I call the $6 billion port betrayal, the official reasons of why the deal collapsed, and interesting clues that points to the unofficial reasons. So here we are, December 2022, the day the Abu Amama agreement is signed. But beneath the surface, the country is sitting on a powder keg that is about to explode in spectacular fashion. Sudan had endured a long history of chronic instability, coups, and struggles between military and civilian forces. The latest chapter began in 2019 when longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir was overthrown, leading to a fragile power-sharing agreement. That arrangement shattered on October 2021 when General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo launched a military coup. Initially, these two men were allies, but their alliance was built on sand. Dagalo, leader of the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, began to see al-Burhan as a threat. The RSF had developed vast economic interests and forged significant links with the UAE, becoming a major conduit for gold smuggled from Western Sudan. Key disputes emerged over integrating the RSF into the regular army, with disagreements raging over timelines and the status of RSF officers in the new hierarchy. The RSF's connections to the UAE gave them an independent platform of power and weaponry, enabling them to contest control of the Sudanese state. In February and March 2023, just months after the Abu Amama deal was signed, the RSF began extensively recruiting members and mobilizing forces in cities like Khartoum. The Sudanese armed forces declared this mobilization illegal, and tensions reached a breaking point when RSF forces took control of a military base south of the city. On April 2023, just 4 months after the port deal was signed, Sudan erupted into civil war. The two former allies who had jointly seized power were now at each other's throats, with the entire country as their battlefield. The Abu Amama project, signed during this period of extreme political fragility, suddenly found itself caught in the crossfire of Sudan's deadliest conflict in decades. What happened next would transform a $6 billion partnership into a battlefield of accusations and mistrust. By late 2024, something had shifted dramatically. The Sudanese government wasn't just fighting a civil war anymore. They were pointing fingers at an unexpected culprit, their former business partner, the United Arab Emirates. The accusations were serious and very specific. Sudanese officials claimed the UAE was secretly arming the RSF with advanced weapons that were changing the entire conflict. We're talking about Chinese-made guided bombs, howitzers, and strategic drones, to which the Emirate is the only known buyer of some of these weapon systems. Sudan accused the UAE of running a covert operation disguised as humanitarian aid centered around an airfield and hospital in Chad. The financial allegations were equally damaging. Sudan claimed the UAE was directly funding the conflict. The Emirates' response? Complete denial. They insisted their involvement was purely humanitarian, providing over $600 million in assistance and establishing field hospitals in neighboring countries. They called for ceasefires and political processes while maintaining there was no military solution to the conflict. But Sudan persisted. The country's finance minister Gibril Ibrahim fired the first diplomatic shot in November last year. Standing in Port Sudan, Ibrahim made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the business world. Sudan was cancelling the $6 billion Abu Amama port deal with the UAE. Ibrahim's reasoning was crystal clear. He explicitly attributed the cancellation to growing accusations by the Sudanese government against the UAE, claiming Abu Dhabi was providing logistical, political, and media support to the RSF. He stated that the Memorandum of Understanding was not legally binding for Sudan, and that the cancellation would protect the country's sovereignty. The public messaging that followed was as dramatic as the actions themselves. The minister also declared that Sudan would not give the UAE a single centimeter on the Red Sea coast, a direct challenge to the Emirate ambition. Sudan's military leadership went even further, publicly declaring the UAE an aggressor state. Meanwhile, the Emirate maintained a conspicuous public silence. When they did speak, it was through legal channels, firmly rejecting what they called unfounded allegations, and stating that Sudan's case was completely devoid of evidence. It was now clear that what started as a business partnership between Sudan and the UAE had transformed into something much larger. Then came May 2025, the moment that shattered any remaining illusions of peace. The RSF launched a devastating wave of drone strikes on Port Sudan, the de facto capital, administrative hub, and the place that had remained relatively safe throughout the conflict. The targets were calculated and brutal. The drones hit Port Sudan's port, its international airport, fuel depots, power stations, the naval base, and key hotels. Within hours, the city was plunged into darkness. Sudanese officials explicitly blamed the UAE for supplying the drone technology that enabled these devastating strikes. Some even claimed that the Emirate launched advanced drone strikes from Red Sea bases at the request of the RSF. And the evidence for this seemed compelling. The response was swift and decisive. Just 1 day after the devastating drone attacks, Sudan severed all diplomatic ties with the UAE. The Emirati embassy was ordered closed, the ambassador was recalled, and years of partnership were officially over. While the UAE publicly denies any direct role, the timeline, to me, poses suspicious questions. If Port Sudan collapses, where would trade be redirected? Is this just conspiracy, or are there historical patterns that fit this timeline? Let's dig deeper. Sudan is one of Africa's top gold producers, yielding over 100 tons annually, much of it from artisanal miners. Port Sudan acts as the official export hub for this gold, enabling the government to tax shipments and sustain revenues even during the civil war. A complete collapse of the port through sustained infrastructure attacks could immensely benefit the emirate by bypassing this oversight. A crippled Port Sudan means a vacuum in gold regulation. UAE-backed RSF networks, already documented in smuggling operations, could divert gold via alternative routes like overland paths to Chad or airlifts to allied bases, funneling it directly to Dubai for laundering. This isn't hypothetical. Independent investigations have already traced Sudanese gold flowing through Dubai, which refines up to 80% of Africa's illicit gold, effectively capturing a larger slice of Sudan's $10 billion annual market. No formal deal needed, just plausible deniability. And this isn't without precedent. In Yemen, after coalition setbacks, the UAE deployed proxies and airstrikes to seize ports and resources, redirecting trade to Emirati hubs like Socotra. Similarly, in Libya, failed negotiations led to Emirati drone campaigns and mercenary support aimed at dominating oil routes and trade. The playbook is consistent. When partnerships stall, instability somehow creeps in and becomes a lever. Some call it a tragedy, others call it geopolitics, but in this case, it may just be strategy. The Abu Amama port was never just about trade, but about control of sea lanes, of resources, and of influence. Because in a region where ports are power and trade is sovereignty, there may be only one rule worth remembering. If you can't join them, destroy them. And as history shows, some empires are built not by what deal they sign, but by what deal they survive.